To week 5, module 1. I guess this is hump week because we are effectively over halfway through the online course. We're at a point at which much more of the information is now going to be released to your responsibility to complete and think about and put together. And I'm excited to see what happens as we move from the reflections to the actions to the presentations to your students over the next 3 sessions. Week 5, Module 1 is about habits 5 and 6. We're actually going to finish Covey's 6 habits as they relate to going from independence to interdependence. And again, the essential question we're asking ourselves when we're talking about public victories is, why would people want to work with you? Why would they accept you in a leadership role? Why would people want your sphere of influence to impact them more? In order to get ready for this week's conversation, you've accomplished several things. You've thought long and hard about your deposits and withdrawals with others. You're building those interpersonal victories on top of the personal victories we continue to work on within ourselves. You've thought about a new definition of winning, that everyone can win as opposed to winning and losing paradigm that always has somebody winning and somebody losing. And you're learning and doing and teaching these new habits as you've learned them. And as a result, hopefully you're seeing ways that with these habits, you're positioning yourself to expand your sphere of influence and, most importantly, your sphere of effectiveness. You've completed your reflection and commitment blog post number 4, and you've completed your collegial coach response number 3. So once again, we've moved from the leadership maturity scale, from going from dependent to independent by looking at personal victories, behaviors within ourselves, being proactive, starting with the end in mind, putting first things first. As we develop these self-discipline habits of personal victory, we put ourselves in a position to be less dependent on others, more reliant on ourselves as a locus of control in our destiny and the things we do next. We've moved from going from dependent to independent. We've developed and are developing an internal mastery, a self-discipline, a control. And within that, we start to gain respect not only for ourselves, but from others. And as we gain that respect from others, that we can be reliable and independent, we attract the likelihood other people feel more comfortable working with us. Therefore, our sphere of influence increases. And in order to really build on these public victories, we've talked about 3 new habits, public habits. Habit number 4 is thinking win-win. And now we begin to talk about the last 2 habits that move us from independence to interdependence, where we're truly effectively working in collaboration with the other members of our organization and school. So habit number 1, stand up, do it with me. Come on. You too. Be proactive. Habit number 2, start with the end in mind. Habit number 3, put first things first. As we move from independent to interdependent, habit number 4 was think win-win. Now habit number 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Once more with me, seek first to understand and then be understood. This is the habit of listening as effectively as you would like to be speaking, and perhaps listening before we try to be understood. Seeking first to be understood and to understand and then to be understood is probably the most difficult habit that takes continual effort to work on and build. We're always prepared to give our opinion, overwhelming the opinions of others. In other words, when we seek just to be understood, we're trying to win without worrying about whether you're winning or losing. When we seek to understand and then be understood, we position ourselves to thinking win-win. It's the habit of thinking win-win. We look for ways that As other people reveal what's important to them, what their goals are, what their story is, what the emotion and knowledge and commitment and thoughts they bring to this task or this issue, when we truly listen, we increase our ability to understand. When we truly understand, we increase the likelihood that another person's ideas and thoughts, story and aspirations, as diverse as they are from our own story and solutions, perhaps we can find common ground. And that common ground is the source of our ability to actually find win-wins. But we so often see and witness in ourselves much more attention to what we're going to say than how we're going to hear. This has been called sometimes the notion that what happens when people try to be understood at the same time? You end up with, as Covey called it, collective monologue. We're having a dialogue, but not really, because I'm talking and not listening, and you're talking and not listening, so a collective monologue. It's not really listening, but either speaking or preparing to speak. Sometimes you're quiet, but instead of listening to what the other person's saying and understanding them, you're thinking about the next thing you're going to say. You're waiting for your turn to have your monologue. It's very, very ineffective. And what happens when people believe that their message is not being listened to, if there's no attempt to understand my position, my story, my perspective, my ideas, my goals, the likelihood I'm going to have to be respectful and sensitive to listen to yours and to understand what you're trying to say goes down. In other words, we start putting ourselves in a position just by our lack of listening to be thinking win-lose or lose-lose. So thinking win-win is a notion of seeking first to understand and then to be understood. Doesn't mean you always talk second. It means you listen with as much conviction, with as much purposeful intent as the words you're choosing to use. The conversation here is learning to be a more empathetic listener. It takes a lot of energy. It takes skill. It takes emotional strength that comes from all first three habits, where I'm prepared to really hear you out rather than just to talk louder to you or talk more to you or use more words to you or wait for my turn to convince you because you have nothing to convince me about. Empathetic listeners put aside their position, put aside the other things that are making them daydream while one talks, and really trying to listen. And in the process of being an empathetic listener, as you take the information in, you're not there to judge, you're not there to probe, you're not there to advise. You're there to try to understand what the person's trying to say, their emotion behind that, and the empathetic starters of, I think what you're saying is, let me try to summarize what I hear you saying. And then, if you can really help the person understand you heard them, whether you agree with them or not, you heard them. You heard their position. You're not unfairly characterizing it or labeling it or putting judgment on it. See the opportunity that creates to now say, I'd like the same opportunity. In restorative practices, when we talk about circles and circle time to build listening and talking skills, it's the very same thing. You're not waiting your turn to share your idea. You're also there to hear everybody else's idea. And as you show a willingness to hear other people's idea, respect for you goes up. And now and with that respect and that trust and that show of legitimate concern for another person's ideas, feelings, and thoughts, you increase the likelihood they're going to hear your ideas, feelings, and thoughts. And from that, great things can happen. Without that, disaster. So leadership habits now 1, 2, and 3. Say them with me again. Be proactive. Start with the end in mind. Put first things first. Habit number 4, think win-win. Habit number 5, new one, seek first to understand and then be understood, now goes along with habit 6. And habit 6 is the habit of, if I'm thinking win-win, if I'm seeking to understand and then be understood, if I've shown great personal discipline to be proactive and starting with and express my goals and putting first things first, if I've done those 5 habits, the likelihood that we can collaborate increases, and therefore habit 6 is synergize. Do it with me, synergize. And synergy is the habit of true collaboration. It's the habit of saying, how can together we come up with better work, better results than if we each work independently? How do we work together to create a better solution that we might have thought of if I was doing this alone or only thinking the solution alone? See, compromise, as I said last week, is about 1 + 1 = 1.5. Each of us gives something up. But when we synergize, when we work together, when we look for solutions that are common ground for both of us, that meet both of our concerns, that respect both of our positions, both of our thoughts, both of our stories, perhaps our 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5. The idea that together our solutions become better adapted, better adopted, better created, better conceived, more people to work on getting the input and buy-in from others, more people to work on implementing them, that this work up front is what your leadership, democratic leadership style can be the alternative to authoritatively deciding what to do and who to do it. This allows you to start looking at synergy as the key to making yourself an effective democratic leader when we start talking about leadership styles. So how do we work together so our solutions are better than my solution? So our workforce to implement the solution is better aligned, better prepared, more effective than our workforce if I decide on the results and tell you what to do. Synergy action plan, you define the problem or opportunity. You seek ways to understand before being understood. You brainstorm new and creative options. You look for the best solution, the highway, not the compromise, but the way that we can meet everybody's goals, everybody's needs most effectively. At least to make sure that our solution has been developed with respect to having heard people's opinions, no matter how diverse they are. So part of that is to really create a culture where you value differences, where you seek knowledge, information from people and how to complete your tasks. That membership includes people with very, very diverse opinions up front, rather than figuring how to avoid those people's input in the development of a program, thinking you're going to get buy-in further down the line. It doesn't work. To recognize others for their contributions and their strengths instead of their weaknesses, to solicit ideas broadly in brainstorming sessions, and when people share their ideas and share their thoughts, when you express that you're understanding people, avoid stereotyping and labeling them in order to pigeonhole them and make them defensive. Synergy means I see the value in others. What I do with others is look for a third alternative, and what I find and receive is better results. Think of a person in life whom you're having a difference with. In habit 4, you'd start with, why don't we agree to communicate and find a better solution? We will find a win-win, or maybe we won't have a deal at all. Let's really listen first to what each of us have to say before we share our own opinions, and then together let's find a creative solution. So what's next for week 6? Think long and hard about your empathetic listening. Think about searching for common ground. Think about the times that people are talking to you and you're thinking about something else instead of thinking about what the person's trying to say. Implement your teaching plan to others. Submit your reflection commitment blog post 5, seek first to understand and then be understood. And finally, your reflection and commitment blog post 6, synergize. As a critical coach, post your response to your partner's blog post 4. And until then, every good conversation starts with good listening. Have a great week.